Salvatore Riina, known as the Beast, was a formidable figure who cast a dark shadow over the world of organized crime. Born in Corleone, Sicily, he rose through the ranks of the Sicilian Mafia, leaving behind a trail of violence and bloodshed. His cold, calculating demeanor earned him the reputation as one of the most ruthless and feared mob bosses in history. Responsible for orchestrating numerous assassinations, he displayed a cunning and strategic mind that kept law enforcement agencies struggling to bring him to justice. With a legacy marred by terror and cruelty, Salvatore Riina's life became synonymous with the depths of human depravity in the criminal underworld. Salvatore Riina was born on November 16, 1930, and raised in a poor rural cottage in Corleone, a province in Palermo. Born the second of 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls, Salvatore Riina left school at the age of 7 and helped work almost 3 hectares of land which had been owned by the family for 3 generations. Around 5 p.m. on September 11, 1943, Salvatore Riina, his 2 brothers, and their father were walking home when they came across an unexploded bronze-colored bomb. The explosive powder contained within might be used to fill rifle cartridges, while the iron casing could be fashioned into a plowshare. They also discovered a gray cylinder, a 16-inch long cannon shell that had cracked near the tip, while exploring nearby. It appeared to have been abandoned by German soldiers who had stationed in the vicinity until the Allied invasion 2 months before. When they got home, Riina's father started defusing the bomb. His father then peeked inside the cannon shell. Apparently, there was no powder left inside, so he began striking the shell on a stone. The shell slid out of his grasp and exploded. Fragments ripped into him and his son, killing both of them. Another son was hit on the right leg, neck, and cheeks by shrapnel. Even the mule they owned was killed in the explosion, but Riina had not a single scratch on him. Riina was the only male in the family, with his injured brother remaining in the hospital. Despite the extra burden on his shoulders, Riina abandoned the daily grind of a peasant's existence within 2 years of his father's death. A short, squat figure with strong calloused hands and arms too long for his build, Riina was nicknamed El Corto or Shorty as everyone got to know him. Riina made friends with another rebellious peasant's son 2 years younger than him. Like Riina, Bernardo Provenzano had left school early to work in the fields. But he too decided this was not the life for him and had no intention of spending the rest of his days waiting at dawn in the main piazza of Corleone to be picked, or ignored, by overseers choosing who would work that day. Riina and Provenzano soon became inseparable and were both recruited by Luciano Leggio. Riina and Provenzano became known as Corleone's Holy Trinity, dominated by the older Leggio, and took to greeting each other with a kiss on the cheek. Provenzano's older brother reprimanded him as the family had never had anything to do with the mafia and the brother wanted to keep things that way. A police officer who similarly warned Riina against spending any time with Leggio had even less success. When Riina was 18 years old, he picked his first public fight on the day Corleone celebrated a procession of a crucified Christ. Soon after the procession had ended, Riina and several of his friends fought with Domenico Di Matteo, a young peasant, and his cousins. The teenagers went for each other with sticks and knuckle dusters. 10 days later, the 2 sides agreed to meet and again started fighting, punching and kicking each other. As the teenagers wrestled each other, one of the opponents pulled out a revolver. However, Riina instantly whipped out an automatic pistol, took aim at the cousin with the pistol, and fired half a dozen shots in quick succession. Riina never hit the one holding the pistol, but rather hit Di Matteo. The cousin fired back, one bullet hitting Riina first in the right leg and then in the left. Di Matteo died that night of a hemorrhage caused by Riina's shot lacerating his femoral artery. Riina was sentenced to 12 years in jail, but served only 6 years before he was released for good behavior in 1955. While in prison, Riina passed an exam which is equivalent to that of 8-year-old school children. A year after his release, Riina set his sights on one of his best friends, Calogero Bagarella's sister, Antonietta. At the age of 26, Riina was at the time double her age. Calogero and his brother Leoluca were both mafiosi, and not only was Riina and Calogero best friends, but Calogero was also in love with Riina's sister. On August 2, 1958, Michele Navarra, a qualified physician who headed the mafia family from the town of Corleone in Sicily, along with fellow doctor Giovanni Russo, were shot to death. This was after Navarra tried to have Leggio killed in June 1958. After Navarra's murder, those loyal to him sued for peace, and Leggio agreed to a meeting a month after the funeral. Riina, sent by Leggio, arrived alone and unarmed. When 3 of Navarra's henchmen arrived, Riina spoke and wanted them to give up the names of the hitmen who tried to kill Leggio. But Riina had no intention of getting an answer. Then Provenzano and another mafioso emerged from under the trees and opened fire with sawn-off shotguns. One of Navarra's followers was shot in the face and died instantly. The other 2 fled, however they were chased and shot dead. Provenzano was shot and wounded in the head as he raced down the street. Apparently Navarra's men also had backup. Thinking Provenzano was dead, the men rushed to get Provenzano's accomplice. However, he managed to find refuge in a shop. The only eyewitness account of any use was supplied by a police officer who said he had recognized Riina among the gunmen chasing each other. Several witnesses did testify that Provenzano had been among the killers. But a month later they suddenly went back on their testimony and left Corleone, emigrating to northern Italy. The Corleonesi then chose to carry out their killings in broad daylight, not only because they knew it would hold, but also because they wanted to be seen by the people of the town. There was no more talk of peace, and Leggio ordered his men to destroy his enemies. Riina swiftly emerged as Leggio's most trusted killer, never hesitating to cut down rivals in the street or in shops where they happened to seek refuge. Leggio's wrath also struck locals who had nothing to do with the mafia. For example, when Riina shot a fruit and olive oil trader in the back, heart and mouth. The last bullet a warning to anyone who witnessed Leggio's crimes, to keep silent. In 1963, the feud ended with Leggio installed as undisputed boss of what is known as the Corleonesi, and it became a formidable training ground for Salvatore Riina and Bernardo Provenzano. In December 1963, Riina was arrested under the name Giovanni Grande, claiming he was a farmer and even had a driving license to prove it. At the police station, Superintendent Angelo Mangano questioned Riina for hours, but Riina insisted that he was Grande. However, another policeman would later walk up to Riina and say, "I know who you are, you're Toto Riina." Riina was sent to Ucciardone prison in Palermo, where he would share a cell with Gaspare Mattolo. Mattolo came to idolize Riina and was impressed by the way Riina kept calm at all times. Riina gave Mattolo a note for the prison governor at his new facility in southern Sicily when he was transferred. The note made sure that Mattolo was welcomed as an honored guest there. In May 1964, Leggio was arrested by Mangano and sent to Ucciardone prison. In 1966, Riina and Leggio were summoned to be questioned by Judge Cesare Terranova, who was then a young prosecutor. However, both gave Terranova a hostile reception. In 1969, Terranova brought 61 other mafiosi, including Leggio, Riina, and Provenzano, to trial. The top members of the Corleonesi were all in the dock at once to face allegations of murder, criminal conspiracy, and other crimes. Due to the Corleonesi's rising prominence, the trial was moved to Bari in southern Italy's mainland because Palermo's judges would be too exposed to intimidation, according to the judiciary. As the trial drew to an end after 3 months, the prosecutor demanded a life sentence for Leggio and a total of 300 years in jail for the accused. A few days before the verdict was due, the judges received an anonymous express letter sent from Palermo. When the verdict was announced, the presiding judge read out the names of the 64 accused and declared 64 acquittals. The judges ruled there was insufficient evidence to convict them of criminal conspiracy or murder. Riina was found guilty of stealing the driving license he had handed to police on the evening of his arrest and sentenced to a year and 6 months in jail. Riina was promptly re-arrested by the police, who wanted him sent into exile on the grounds that his return could prompt more killings. A court ordered that Riina spend the next 4 years in San Giovanni in Persiceto, a small town in central Italy. However, Riina first demanded he be allowed to settle family affairs, and during the time he was given, he got engaged to Antonietta. At the local police station in San Giovanni, Riina signed the register of people placed under special surveillance, only to disappear a few days later, becoming a fugitive. By late 1969, mafia bosses in Palermo came to the conclusion that the person responsible for the first mafia war in the car bomb in Sicily was Michele the Cobra Cavataio. The Palermo bosses decided that Cavataio was a loose cannon and must be eliminated. In a joint effort, Leggio sent Provenzano and Calogero Bagarella as part of the hit squad to take out Cavataio. On December 10, 1969, Provenzano, Calogero Bagarella and 4 other mafiosi set off in 2 cars and drove to the offices of a construction company in northern Palermo, which Cavataio used as his headquarters. 5 of the 6 hitmen wore police uniforms. Cavataio and 2 of his associates were killed. However, Cavataio managed to shoot and kill Calogero Bagarella, and Provenzano was shot in the hand during the shootout. This was Provenzano's 3rd shootout in which he narrowly escaped, and would earn him the moniker, the Tractor. The Corleonesi took advantage of their new notoriety to ingratiate themselves with Palermo's bosses. They found an early ally in the capo, Gaetano Budlamenti. Provenzano and Riina served as Budlamenti's obedient aides. Budlamenti had no issue carrying out his commands while he was imprisoned. He delivered Riina his directives via a middleman who visited him in jail, who in turn briefed Riina and Provenzano. Without even requesting an explanation, Riina carried out the murders that Budlamenti had commanded. But Riina soon began to do much more than simply act as executioner for Budlamenti. He began to question mafiosi relentlessly to find out as much as he could about bosses and their clans. In 1970, the Sicilian Mafia Commission was revived and consisted of 10 members, but was initially ruled by a triumvirate consisting of Gaetano Budlamenti, Stefano Bontad and the Corleonesi boss Luciano Leggio. While in hiding, Leggio was worried the other 2 bosses on the triumvirate would make decisions without consulting him. To prevent this, he appointed one of his 2 lieutenants to represent him. He didn't have a very high opinion of Provenzano's intelligence, so he chose Salvatore Riina, an appointment that was the starting point for Riina's ascent to the heights of the mafia. The Corleonesi now appeared to be on an equal footing with 2 of the most powerful Palermo bosses, but they were still to carve themselves a share of a business that was bringing unprecedented wealth to the rest of the mafia, and that was drug trafficking. Bontad was one of the first to bring drugs into Sicily. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, Bontad and his allies controlled heroin trafficking, running refineries in Sicily and supplying the American market. Leggio moved to Milan in the early 1970s after leaving his property on the slopes of Mount Etna. Leggio met Riina and Provenzano as well as numerous other mafiosi in a wine shop and restaurant, where he also conducted the most of his business, which included kidnapping and drug trafficking. The initial conflict with the Corleonesi was brought up by Bontad and a number of other Palermo bosses' refusal to split the drug trade's earnings. The Corleonesi were inexperienced in drug trafficking and short on cash, so when Riina tried his first business operations, he had to enlist the help of other mafiosi. The eager Corleonesi swiftly made it clear that they did not have any intention to follow mafia rules. Forced to watch the drug trafficking from the sidelines, they found kidnapping a quicker way of making money. However, the new tactic exasperated the other triumvirate bosses Bontod and Badalamenti, as it targeted the very class who were providing much of the profits from racketeering and kickbacks on contracts. The Corleone, as they did with the kidnappings, notified no one as they launched their first attack against the Italian state. In May 1971, Leggio himself was among the mafiosi who ambushed Judge Pietro Scaglione and his bodyguard. In August 1972, Riina kidnapped the son of Arturo Cassina, an elderly count who was friends with Bontod. With Leggio in Milan, Riina swiftly became the Corleone's main envoy in Palermo. Even though Riina still had to answer to Leggio, he gradually built himself a solid base in the city, even forging new relationships with mafiosi across the island. Riina's growing influence did not go unnoticed. Bontod openly mocked Riina, calling him the peasant from Corleone. This only angered Riina, and Badalamenti, who had been the first to welcome the Corleone, now chose to back Bontod against them and went as far as to set a trap for Riina. Badalamenti arranged a meeting with him at an accountant's office in Palermo and then tipped off the police. However, Riina, sensing trouble, stayed away. From then on, the Corleone grew extremely cautious. Riina would attend one meeting of the triumvirate and Provenzano the next, or they would postpone the meetings at the last minute. In 1974, the full commission was reconstituted under the leadership of Badalamenti, and the same year Leggio was captured and imprisoned for the 1958 murder of Michela Navarra. In 1974, 19 years after their engagement, Riina married Antonietta in secret. After Leggio was in prison, Riina saw this as an advantage. However, the new commission argued that kidnappings made the mafia unpopular and the pressure of police investigations harmed the clan on whose territory the kidnapping had taken place. Riina kidnapped Luigi Corleone, not only one of Sicily's richest men but also the father-in-law of Nino Salvo, one of the state's tax collectors for Sicily and friend of Badalamenti and Bontod. Corleone would die or be killed when his family refused to pay the ransom. Badalamenti and Bontod, feeling embarrassed, knew it was the Corleone but could not prove it. Riina set out to conquer the mafia, clan by clan. In Palermo, he forged new alliances and gradually extended his network from Trapani in the west to Catania in the east. At commission meetings, he asked that fellow bosses place some soldiers at his disposal so that he could use them when he traveled across Sicily. In doing so, Riina created what amounted to a small mafia of his own. However, Giuseppe Di Cristina became suspicious. In 1977, Riina ordered the murder of the Carabinieri Colonel Giuseppe Russo, the officer who was responsible for investigating the kidnappings. Many clans complained they had not been given any warning of the murder, with the result that several mafiosi had been arrested. The boss Giuseppe Calderone, from Catania, did seek an explanation for the officer's murder from Michela Greco, who replied saying that Riina said, "When a cop is killed, no questions should be asked." Di Cristina insulted Greco to his face, saying that Riina treated Greco as a puppet. 2 days later, Di Cristina narrowly escaped elimination. Riina then accused Badalamenti of setting up a drug trafficking route which supplied American cities, including Detroit, without telling other bosses. Badalamenti was eventually expelled from the commission in 1978. In April 1978, Di Cristina, fearing for his life, turned to the police for help. The next month, Di Cristina was walking out of a block of flats in Palermo when 2 hitmen opened fire on him. He did manage to shoot one of them in the leg, however, they finished him off with 6 shots to the head when his gun jammed. The hit took place in the territory belonging to the boss Salvatore Riina, another close associate of Bontod. The Corleone would make it their mission to assassinate an opponent as soon as he tried to seek retribution for a friend or ally. Giuseppe Calderone discovered a bomb under his car seat 2 months after Di Cristina was killed. After being shot and receiving a major stomach wound the next month, Calderone passed away 3 days later. The years 1979 to 1980 saw the killings of Michele Reina, provincial secretary of the Christian Democrats, Boris Giuliano, Palermo's deputy police chief, Judge Cesare Terranova, president of the appeals court, Pier Santi Mattarella, the Christian Democrat, president of the regional government, and Emanuele Basile, a captain in the Carabinieri police. Bontad, Inzerillo, and the expelled boss secretly planned to kill Reina. However, according to Pentito Antonino Giuffre, Reina began a detailed study to find out, district by district, who was close to Bontad and then proceed with their systematic elimination. In each neighborhood, the Corleonesi set up hit squads of young soldiers. Among them was Giuseppe Greco, Reina's favorite killer. On April 23, 1981, Bontad left his 42nd birthday party followed by Giuseppe Greco and caught up with him at a traffic light. Greco fired with a Kalashnikov rifle, leaving him so disfigured it took police several hours to identify him. Tommaso Buscetta tried to warn Inzerillo not to leave his house, not to fix any appointments, and not to speak to anyone, but he ignored this. In May 1981, Inzerillo was ambushed and killed with the same Kalashnikov used to kill Bontad. Buscetta commented, "Inzerillo was killed like a fool because he had an armored car, but he forgot that it only protects you as long as you're inside." The Corleonesi suggested a meeting with Inzerillo's right-hand man, who turned up with 3 other mafiosi, but all 4 of them were eliminated. A few days after Inzerillo's murder, his brother Santo was killed. His other brother, Santino, was also killed along with his uncle Calogero Di Maggio. Inzerillo's 16-year-old son, who swore to seek revenge for his father's death, was killed as well. Gaspare Mattolo would later claim that this was not the second mafia war which occurred from 1981 to 1983, but that it was a slaughter. An estimated 1,000 mafiosi died in the purges, 300 simply vanished, however none of them were Corleonesi.